بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان. والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان. والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. وله الجوار المنشآت في البحر كالأعلام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. يسأله من في السماوات والأرض كل يوم هو في شان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. سنفرغ لكم أيها الثقلان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. يا معشر الجن والإنس إن استطعتم أن تنفذون من أقطار السماوات والأرض فانفذوا لا تنفذون إلا بسلطان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. يرسل عليكما شواظ من نار ونحاس فلا تنتصران فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. فإذا انشقت السماء فكانت وردة كالدحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. فيومئذ لا يسأل عن ذنبه إنس ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. يعرف المجرمون بسيماهم فيؤخذ بالنواسي والأقدام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. هذه جهنم التي يكذب بها المجرمون يطوفون بينها وبين حميم آن فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. ولمن خاف مقام ربه جنتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. ذواتا أفنان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. فيهما عينان تجريان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. فيهما من كل فاكهة زوجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. متكئين على فرش بطائنها من استبرق وجنى الجنتين دان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. فيهن قاصرات الطرف لم يطمثهن إنس قبلهم ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. كأنهن الياقوت والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان هل جزاء الإحسان إلا الإحسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ومن دونهما جنتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مدهامتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما عينان نضاختان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما فاكهة ونخل ورمان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهن خيرات حسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان حور مقصورات في الخيام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان لم يطمثهن إنس قبلهم ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان متكئين على رفرف خضر وعبقري حسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان تبارك اسم ربك ذي الجلال والإكرام صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على
محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
نانا تیری نواسی آئی ہے گر لٹا کے زینب یہ کہہ رہی تھی روضے پہ مصطفیٰ کے انسانیت کی راہ ڈھونڈے گی دنیا جن سے بکھرے تھے وہ ستارے راہوں میں کربلا کے ہاتھوں سے منہ چھپا کے ہائے روتی تھی فوج آدم بے شیر ہنس رہے تھے نوا گلے لگا کے حسرات یہی تھی باقی ہے لیلا کے دل میں اکبر میدان میں بیجتی ہے طلحہ تجھے بنا کے کوفے کی عورتوں نے خوشیاں بری منائی شہزادیاں آج گزرے ہائے بالوں سے منہ چھپا کے اہل حرم تڑپ کر اونٹوں سے گر پڑے تھے لاشیں پڑے تھے دیکھ کے راہوں میں کربلا کے ماں قید ہو کے اصغر جاتی ہوں اب مدینہ سو جاؤ بس اکیلے سونپا تجھے خدا کو شعلوں میں جل رہے تھے اہل حرم کے خیمے شبیر سو رہے تھے سجدے میں سر کٹا کے میرے غریب بچے لے لو سلام آخر جاتی ہوں میں مدینہ چہلم تیرا منا کے نانا تیری نواسی آئی ہے گر لٹا کے زینب یہ کہہ رہی تھی روضے پہ مصطفیٰ کے برمہدی الموت صلوات
Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, dearest brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum, Jameel wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumin listed on the screen, as well as all other marhumin. Surah Mubarak al-Fatiha. Dua Shafa Mariz is requested for all those who are in need here and elsewhere. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibu al-mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakhshifu as-su'. Amma yujibu al-mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakhshifu as-su'. Amma yujibu al-mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakhshifu as-su'. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. Ya Allah, The Muharram and Safar Fund is still open, and we're only 6% away from meeting the target. Please see Brother Abbas Alu or Brother Sibtain Yusufali in the men's side, or Sister Fatima Abdul Hussein in the sister's side to make a donation. You may also use the QR code displayed on the screen in order to donate. The deadline to sign up for this weekend's Secret of Salat workshop has been extended through tomorrow. Alhamdulillah, there have been a good number of registrations for this workshop. If any parent is in need of babysitting, there will be free babysitting provided. Slots are limited, so please email info@cbefl.org with your child's name and age if interested. We'll now inshallah have majlis by Sayyid Hasan Rizvi. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد محمد وجه. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we are commemorating the Shahadat, the death anniversary of our 8th Holy Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa Ar-Ridha alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. So I want to continue our discussion from last night. So we'll get to that. But first, we'll mention just a few points because, people have been asking for the occasion, the wilada or shahada of each personality. If you can just mention, a few points related to their history specifically on that night, it would be beneficial. So I'll spend a few minutes mentioning one short point. We won't go into a full analysis, but just something short that maybe we've heard or probably haven't heard before about the 8th Imam during his lifetime. And then we'll continue our discussion from last night, inshallah. So most of us, when we think about the 8th Imam and his life and what he dealt with, and in terms of any Imam, usually we talk about the association or the difficulties that they went with because of which Zalim was around at that time, right? And it's very specific to the 8th Imam, right? So when we think of Imam Ar-Ridha alayhi salam, immediately we think of Ma'mun. And when Ma'mun is considered, we think about, he had done, taking him from Medina, forcing him to come, pretending like he's going to be the next leader. And most of us know the history at that point. What's interesting, though, and something that I had no idea myself until I looked into it. So they say that the 8th Imam, his period of imamat was 20 years. Only 5 of those years was during was under or with, simultaneous with Ma'mun. So the majority of the imamat of the 8th Imam was not under Ma'mun. It was 10 years actually, the majority of the time. 10 years of his imamat was under Harun. Then the next 5 years was when Muhammad Amin, right, Ma'mun's brother, when he was in charge, or kind of in charge, fake in charge, I guess. And then finally it shifted over to Ma'mun at the end. So the majority of the imamat of the 8th Imam was, again, I'm saying all this relatively, it was free and he was, it was in ease. Again, I'm saying relatively speaking. All of them are all zalimeen. at the end of the day. And they were all oppressive and they're all, harassing and annoying the imams. But it is interesting that during the beginning of the imamate of the eighth imam. So, one question that the historians ask is, okay, why is it that relatively for the eighth imam, things were pretty quiet in the beginning? What happened then or what didn't happen basically? So they say, look, when Harun had ordered the execution and the assassination of the seventh imam, Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This is actually something that was known to the Muslim public. Everybody knew what had happened. It was known. And he tried to hide it after the fact because Harun did not know there was going to be such a harsh reaction. The Muslims were, how could you have treated, this member of the Ahlul Bayt or this person in such a way? So there was a harsh reaction. So Harun tried his best to, limit it. He made up these lies that, it wasn't me. There was some soldier of mine who went off and did this on his own. I didn't order it. These kind of arguments that we hear people making up all the time. So he tried to cover his tracks actually. So after the fact, so now seventh imam has become Shaheed, right? He's assassinated by Harun. And now his advisors, Harun's advisors are saying, look, there's his son, right? Ar-Ridha ibn Musa. He's now here and he's going around and, he's kind of the next thorn that you have to remove. You have to do something about him. Harun, in front of pretty much all of his advisors, was saying, look, I don't ever want to hear these names of these Alawis or anybody ever again. I'm done with this stuff. I can't handle it anymore. And it wasn't because he became a nice guy overnight. He didn't gain a conscience. But what he realized is that all of his efforts in trying to, wipe out the Alawis, right? Wipe out the Shias, torment everybody, assassinate the seventh imam, all of this was in vain. He tried to do this to, control and, obtain power and hold power. But then he saw that the Muslims had a harsh reaction towards it, and he didn't want to, aggravate them even more. Because, as other leaders had kind of learned, if you aggravate too much, then a Mukhtar sort of episode may happen. Or you may have the episode that we mentioned of people rising up against Yazid, right? These things can happen sometimes in history. He said, look, we have to learn from the past. Let's not, aggravate them. Let's leave them alone. I don't want to hear this anymore. So then they say after that date, nobody mentioned anything about Shias or Alawis or the eighth imam towards Harun. They didn't talk about it ever again. He said, leave him alone, just let him do what he wants. It became so free at that time. Again, while Harun was still there and leading, he was in charge. The eighth imam was actually able to openly declare himself the imam and the khalifa. That's how open it was. And it became, so bad that even his followers, the Shias, came and tried to warn and advise the imam. Because the imam would go in open places and tell people, yes, I am the imam. Right? I'm Hujjatullah fil ard. I'm the one who's supposed to be the leader. So they would come to him, as Shias always have the habit of doing, of telling people who are in charge, right, what they should or should not be doing. They said the same thing to Rasulullah. They did the same thing to Imam Ali. So they came to Imam Ar-Ridha. They said, look, you should be careful what you're saying. You shouldn't be so loud. Don't go out in the open. Don't declare yourself the imam. Harun's going to do something about it. And he said, look, who better knows the affairs of what we should be doing or not doing, you or me? And so it was basically their way of saying, look, I got this. Don't worry about it. I know what I'm doing. And then other companions would come, again, good companions, I guess, well-intentioned ones. And they try to say, look, you're going about this the wrong way. You can't be so open because then your blood will be shed just like your fathers and your forefathers. You shouldn't be so open about your imamate. And basically he told them, and I'm paraphrasing the hadith, again, because I want to move on to the previous discussion from last night. He said, look, if Harun touches a hair on my head, if one drop of blood is spilled of mine from Harun, then you will know that I'm not an imam. So this is how pretty much harsh he had to be with his own Shias, saying that, look, I know something that you don't. We understand the zaman, we understand the situation of what's going on right now better than you do. All you, again, non-Ahlul Bayt, non-imams, when you take a look at the world, you're looking in very superficial means. As the same thing happened to every single other imam, right? Same thing happened to the Prophet. Everybody looks out to the world. They think they understand what's going on. They think they're able to decide and declare and analyze everything, right? Using whatever means they had. And then they start going and advising the Prophet. They advise the imams, you should do this, you shouldn't do this. They did the same thing to Imam Hussein as well. Don't do this, don't do this. He said, we know better our affairs. So the same thing happened to the eighth imam. He said, I know what I'm doing, don't worry about it. And so that's why he was completely left untouched during the time of Harun. He was free to go around. He went, he taught, he spread the message in that sense. And the time of Muhammad Amin as well, right after Harun had died. Muhammad Amin was busy fighting with his brother Ma'mun for Khilafah. So at that time as well, the 8th Imam was also going around openly declaring his imamat, spreading teachings, having open discussions. It wasn't a big deal because they were too busy and too occupied with other things. So I thought this might be an interesting piece of history for us to know that the majority, 15 years out of 20 years of the imamat of the 8th Imam, he was fairly free. He was spreading a lot of information. We have a lot of ahadith from him as well, and partially probably because he had that open time, that free time, relatively speaking at least. And it was only that five final years of his imamat where he had to deal with the policies of Ma'mun. It's interesting, right? Ma'mun is the one who brings him close, right? Everybody else had left him alone. Harun and Muhammad Amin. Ma'mun is the one who, again, as this facade, he brings him close, but then while doing that, he's pretty much under house arrest. He's not allowed to go out in the open. He's not allowed to spread the teachings in that same sense. So sometimes we know when we're analyzing situations in the world as well, we have to be careful the way we analyze things too, right? It's easy for us to look at superficial variables, look at it from the surface level and try to analyze it like that. Whether it's, politics, domestic, foreign, whatever it is. Sometimes there is, as they say, more than meets the eye, right? We have to take a deeper look. We have to see those who have greater amounts of ilm and wisdom and hikmah. What sort of things are they saying? Which ways are they pointing the ummah towards? What are their, let's say, focuses on what we should be doing in our communities? We look towards that and we'll see, usually it ends up being a different way and a different focus than what you and I may think. I'll give one example, if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The topic comes up pretty much, especially every Muharram. A speaker comes, they have their series designed or whatever. They talk about a few different topics. Now, when I was growing up, in our center, we pretty much only had, Urdu Zakirin. That's all who came there. We didn't really have ulama in that sense. And the reason was twofold, or two-way, I'll say. One is because finding ulama was tough then. And there would be some who would come, they would invite from overseas. So those who had a lot of ilm and a lot of knowledge, I say real knowledge. But they would come and they would try to give dars. They'd try to give ilmi and discuss ilmi topics from the minbar. But the people sitting down below would say, no, we don't want to hear any of that stuff, right? We want faza'il, we want to, feel great, we want to do nada hedris. That's what we want in our majalis. So no thank you. Like, it's great that you can talk about all this wonderful philosophy and, all these, educational pieces of information. No thank you, right? Now go to a classroom, do all that. We don't want to hear that. So one problem was the scarcity of ulama like that, and the second was the general public just didn't want that, unfortunately, right? The other issue is that the Zakirin who would be speaking about these things, they set up a certain standard for the listeners as well. If for years and years and years, communities are just used to hearing things which kind of got their emotions riled up, then if somebody comes and gives a boring speech, then it's kind of like, okay, what is this? I remember a famous story, an alim, right, that still is, from North America. He was reciting at one place, and after the majlis, one of the members, again, well-intentioned, as we always say, they came to the Mulana afterwards, and, the Mulana like, Mulana, it was really nice, alhamdulillah, good majlis, and all this. He's like, lekin, maza nahi aaya. And this alim, he was upset. He's like, maza nahi aaya? He's like, you came to the majlis of Ahlul Bayt to have fun? Like, what's wrong with you? And I know sometimes some of the speakers come, and, it's like a Bollywood movie, right? You laugh, you cry, you have ups or downs, that's how it is. And, it's entertaining. Your emotions are peaked, it's good. But is that really the point of the majlis? Probably not. But unfortunately, again, that, and which will connect to the point that we're going to get to, right, from last night, we got used to hearing all of these things for so long that when it goes a complete different way and we try to get educated, then it's like, look, we're not used to that stuff. Maybe we should, save that for a seminar or a workshop or, something else. Maybe the minbar is not the place for that. Okay. So the point is this. When we are hearing these ideas from, again, from down here, from up here, whatever you're saying, we have to try to, figure out. So Ayatul Sistani has talked about what topics, right? He's given this advice to the muballighin. The topics that he's advised for all the speakers, especially in Muharram, is that they should talk about contemporary issues. He's given examples. You can find the speeches they release in the English translation every single year, right? He says, if divorce and abortion or drugs or issues with youth, if these are the problems in your community, That's what needs to be addressed from the minbar. How often is that stuff actually talked about? A lot of people are not talking about that stuff from the minbar for many reasons, right? Some of which I already mentioned. If that's the stuff that, we're trying to follow the advice of the ulama and not try to create a minbar of our own, right? A cultural minbar that you and I might be used to when we were growing up. We should again look to what the ulama, the maraja are saying, what the minbar is designed for and what it should address. If that's the case, then those are the types of individuals that should be invited and spoken, that should be allowed to speak. And we should make sure that they're the ones that can actually adequately address these issues. And not just bring people that will, as we say, bring in the crowds and get everybody hyped up, right? So as we connect to this point that we had left with last night, one of the main issues of individuals, of Muslims, is that we have this surface level Islam that we're holding on to, which is great. But even when our habits have been brought over from when we grew up, when we've come from overseas, some of those things are not conducive to our spiritual growth. We have to start looking, right, with a fine sort of lens here, right? The fine-tooth comb, and start going through all the different practices and see, look, which of these things do we really need to address? Which things need to be slowly kind of carved out, right? Very, precisely, very, carefully. And which things slowly do we need to start removing, changing, adding? What needs to be done there? And we all know the story of the father, the son, the donkey. I don't need to tell the story. You all know it, right? You know the point of the story. We can't make everybody happy. We know that. Which ways, or in a sense, we all have to think about who can we actually make upset? Who are we willing, in a sense, as a group to sacrifice? Who can we actually do that to? Because there is going to be a group that's going to be upset at these changes. How can we slowly start to do that, right? Now, again, I can make up my own ideas as I go along, but that may not be the best way to do it. Now, it might be great for everybody else because then all the blame comes on me, right? Like, you suggested it, it's your fault. But if we're able to, come up with different ideas, together as a community, then that might be a way we can slowly start to shift and do things. And, I've mentioned this before. Hopefully, this is a way where after Rabiul Awwal, when we start to go back to our normal Thursday night programs, we can start to think of a way where, one Thursday night out of the month, how we can start to change things a little bit. And, people have given the suggestions, and I think it's a good one, where we try to move away from the monologue format on Thursday nights. And one Thursday out of the month, we do something where it's a bit more interactive, right? Now, what topics we cover and how it gets covered, and will people actually sit down and want to interact, and how that's going to work, we can discuss that. But keep that in your minds. If you have any ideas, again, share it with me or share it with anybody in the MC, and we'll see, inshallah, what we're able to do once we resume our normal programs. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay. So now let's finish up what we were talking about last night. I'm not going to go through the story again. Why? Because YouTube's there. You can go and listen to the story again if you have to, right? Or you can Google it and find it. So this story was between two individuals. Juwaybir, right? This Sudanese person who came from far off, followed Rasulullah, came to Medina. He was somebody who was poor. By his own admission, he's ugly, he's short. He didn't think anybody was going to marry him. Rasulullah told him, you need to get married. Rasulullah sends him off to one of the wealthiest, most honorable people in Medina. He says, yeah, tell him that I said you have to marry your daughter to Juwaybir. He goes there, and as we know, that his daughter Dhalfa, when he hears that his daughter denied Juwaybir, he says, no, call him back, and we should obey what Rasulullah had said. All right, so again, I'm just quickly summarizing the story. Then, of course, he says, yes, fine, I'll marry you to my daughter, because this is what Rasulullah had ordered. He pays the mahr on his own, right? He goes above and beyond. He pays the mahr himself, he buys them a house, and he furnishes the house completely, right? Okay, so this is kind of where we left off. We were going through some analyses and different points where we could extrapolate some lessons. The first thing we said was that the first mistake in the story was not the refusal of Ziyad, the father, to marry his daughter to Juwaybir. That wasn't the first mistake. We said the first issue here was this person, Juwaybir, actually thinking negatively of his own Muslim brothers and sisters. His negativity and pessimism was something which pretty much started this whole episode off. Maybe if he wasn't so negative, maybe if he had actually, been a bit more active in searching for a wife and going out and expecting the best out of the Muslim ummah, or the people of Medina, then maybe he wouldn't have been alone for so long, right? We can say the what ifs, but it was his negativity that pretty much started this whole thing off. And we gave a hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in which he's attributed to have said that there's two things that you'll never find in a mu'min. One is that they're stingy. You'll never find that in a mu'min. You'll never find a stingy mu'min. And you'll never find a mu'min who has a negative assumption or is pessimistic about the rizq. So this would mean that Juwaybir had that pessimism about his rizq, right? One type of rizq, it's not just money. Rizq can be health, it can be wealth, and it also is, marriage. Marriage is a type of rizq as well, right? Having children is a type of rizq. So this was a lack of iman in Juwaybir, right? And this is one of his first issues. We moved on to the second one. The second issue in this story was Ziyad's refusal. Okay, that's the easy one. And we just talked about that, right? That sometimes our culture or our presumptions or assumptions, even though we're Muslim and we do all the typical Muslim stuff, right? We come, we pray, we fast, we give sadaqah, khums, all that stuff is easy. But actually adopting Islamic belief systems practically in our everyday life becomes very, very difficult for a lot of us. And it can be, as we said, maybe it's because of leftover policies or ideas that we've taken over from India, Pakistan, Africa, whatever. We've brought it over here and we're continuing on with that. Now again, if they don't interfere with spiritual growth, then there's no problem, it's fine. But there are many cases, right? I don't have, 10 hours to sit here and go through how many different issues there are, but I think most of us know. Or I'll say the youth know at least, or young adults know. Maybe the elders haven't figured it out yet. But there's a lot of things that we've been practicing for years and years and years, but because we don't know that the Islamic system says something completely different, it's actually caused us to move away from the Islamic goals. So some issues that we may say, people always come to me, we got to bring the youth back to the center. Like, okay, fine. Well, it's going to take us we have to get rid of this thing, for example. No, we can't get rid of that. Okay. So you want spiritual growth. You want the youth here. You want people to be sitting here and interactive and all this. But you're unwilling to let go of this, these 1, 2, 3 cultural things that you've brought in that have nothing to do with Islam. Well then, again, like you said, you're not willing to make the sacrifices then. The positive point about Ziyad here is when it was actually called out to him, when he said, look, this is an order from Rasulullah. You are holding on to your old belief system. Islam came and did away with that. Now, the choice is in your hands. Do you want to hold on to your old ways, or do you want to be somebody that sticks to their word? You say you're a Muslim, you say you're a mu'min, you say that you're honored to be part of the ummah of Rasulullah. Well, this is the order he's giving. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to change your mind or not? And this is the most difficult thing for you and I to deal with. Everybody. Again, not just those from the East, but those of us in the West too. Right? I always pick on the elders. Let's pick on the youth too. All of you youth born and raised over here who have been fed a bunch of liberal, humanist, capitalist propaganda, that's stuff that you're going to have to learn to deal away with too, right? Because I've been sitting with a lot of you, right, in your madrasa classes and this and that. And sometimes it's a pain to have to discuss some of these issues with you, right? Some of these, issues which in the West, it's all about, their definition of justice and freedom and human rights and democracy and all this stuff. And that's fine for them. We have our own system in Islam. And most of the time, it's completely antithetical to what they talk about and what they believe in over here. And a lot of people have become, again, you sound like, Thomas Paine or James Madison, like, you're not reading the Quran or the Hadith. You have a completely different thinking system. So when somebody else comes and offers you an Islamic system, you have to be able to let go of that stuff that your, third grade social studies teacher was forcing down your throat, right? That's going to be tough for you to do too. But that means that those who are in the education system here, you need to make sure yourself that you're imparting the Islamic education system and not either a leftover British colonial system or the American imperial system as well. So these are things that we have to look inside and figure out whether we truly have the Islamic system within us, whether we understand the Islamic belief system, or whether it's just a bunch of actions that we come and perform, once a week or a couple times a month, and the actual way of life and the philosophy is not something we're interested in. We have to think about that. When we're able to impart that true philosophy, then you'll start to see real change happening in the community. Otherwise, then we can continue on these kind of programs every year, and inshallah we'll get some benefit, we'll get the sawab, and maybe you and I will end up in Jannah, we hope, right? Because Allah is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. But will we actually attain real iman? That's, only Allah will know, something like that. Let me give 2 narrations, again, both from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The first is this. First is he's reported to have said, أغفل الناس من لم يتعظ بتغير الدنيا من حال إلى حال. He says the most ghafil human, the most negligent, heedless person is somebody who doesn't take advice, who doesn't learn their lesson from the different changes that happen from time and place. As things progress and change in different situations, as time changes, they don't take lessons and they don't learn. They don't see that things need to change. He said, this is the most heedless individual. Or in other words, again, the type of people who think that they can use the same exact format from where they came from and continue that on wherever they go, that ain't going to work. It's not going to work. If you think that that same julus system, like walking outside and the way that people are and doing matam in that way and carrying around black flags is going to spread the message of Imam Hussein, you're fooling yourself, right? And I know that that clip's been going around recently too, and I agree with that speaker who said that. It's a ridiculous notion to think that this is what's happening, that this is somehow going to spread the message of the Ahlul Bayt, that you can use the same system which may or may not have worked back where he came from. I would even argue it didn't work over there, but fine, let's agree to disagree about that. Let's just say it worked over there. Why do we think it's working over here? Why do you think that any person with a typical Western mindset is going to think that this is actually something that's going to spread the message of the Ahlul Bayt? They don't understand grief and pain in this way. They don't have a system of matam like this. They don't understand that. And many of you, I'm sure, have seen the video from Detroit that came out recently too, right? That matam looks a little different to other people, right? They don't see it as an expression of grief. They see it as something else, right? And I don't want to repeat that, but if you've seen the video, then you know what I'm talking about. So if we want to be honest, if we're truly trying to spread the message and want people to understand what the Ahlul Bayt stood for, then we need to see that, okay, maybe a different vehicle is required while we do it over here. And what that looks like, that's up for debate and that's up for discussion. But we should be wise enough to realize it's not going to be the same thing that worked where we came from. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So let's be careful, right? We want to practice different types of culture, no problem. Let's make sure the practice of culture doesn't turn into the worship of culture, right? Because if that happens, that idol worship is something it's going to destroy our iman, right? Little by little. So we have to be very, very careful. One more salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The last point that I wanted to bring out from this story, and I think this is actually the most crucial point. This whole story with all the negative stuff that's there, right? Juwaybir's negativity, Ziyad's refusal, right? His attachment to his kind of Jahiliyyah culture. This story would have gone completely negative if it wasn't for one factor. And it's only one individual that changed the whole episode. The complete 180, I almost said 360. The complete 180 happened because of Dhalfa, the daughter. She's the one who heard Juwaybir mumbling, right, groaning and saying, what's wrong with this guy? Or what's wrong with these Arabs? Then she came out to her father and started arguing with her father, saying, what's going on? What happened? And then when her father said, this guy came and he claimed this and that, she is the one who stood up to her father and said, look, how can you claim that you're a Muslim, that you're a follower and lover of Rasulullah when you're acting in contrast to what he is teaching? He just gave you an order and you're, saying that you're not going to do that. You are just calling, Juwaybir, this person, this poor individual, you're calling him a liar by saying, I'm going to go talk to Rasulullah myself. Like you just, disrespected this companion. So it's because of actually that daughter, that child in that household of having that strong iman that the whole story now flips around. It's her actions. We always talk about how important daughters are in a family. And I think this is it. Everybody jokes with me because, most of you know I have 3 daughters. They'll say, oh, there's your ticket to Jannah. I was like, yeah, that's the famous version that we hear, right? You have 3 daughters, you get your ticket to Jannah. But that's not the full hadith. The full hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or at least one version of it is, man aala thalatha banat, whoever has 3 daughters, then fa'addabahunna, whoever does ta'deeb, whoever trains them and disciplines them and makes them, proper Muslims, وَزَوَّجُهُنَّ and marries them off properly, وَأَحْسَنَ إِلَيْهِنَّ and who acts with them in the best of manners, then for that person, فَلَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. So you can't just have 3 daughters, you get to Jannah. It's not that easy. You got 3 conditions here. One is you have to train them properly. Create proper Muslim, Muslimas. You have to do that first. You have to marry them off properly too, right? So all this kind of, independence, I'm on my own stuff that, is being pushed in the West. No. We're not about that, right? That's not happening. No person, not a woman, not a man, no person can reach Kamal without getting married, right? Marriage has a very specific notion in Islam. Again, it's a bigger discussion that I can't get into right now, but marriage that's why it's one of the greatest sunnahs that Rasulullah says that if you don't get married, that, it's like you're not following my sunnah. It's a very, very important part. Not wajib, but if you're saying no to it, or you're delaying it, or for whatever reason, like there's an issue there, then, we kind of have to re-examine why that's the case. So, train the daughters properly in Islam, marry them off, and then the father themselves, or the parents both, need to have, ahsana ilayhinna. And ahsan doesn't just mean be good to them. It means every single thing you do to these daughters, you have to beautify your actions completely, right? When you're saying ahsana, it means everything you do has to be beautified. And it's funny, we have other narrations too that say you have to make sure that when you deal with your children, deal with them equally. If you get gifts for your children, give them all gifts, give them all equally. But in one narration, actually, it says, if there actually was going to be some unequal treatment, then it would be to the daughter. If you want to get something a little bit nicer, a little bit more, then it would always go to the daughter, not the son. If Rasulullah is saying, if there was going to be unequal treatment. So if you have to, for some reason, show a little bit more affection, then make sure it goes to the daughter, not to the children. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It's the children, I meant to the daughter, not the sons. So what we see here is that this whole story is not flipped around because of the father. It's not flipped around because of this companion. It's flipped around because they have a child, specifically a daughter who's taqwa-oriented, who's connected and has this overwhelming love for Rasulullah. And it's because of that love and that connection and that obedience to Rasulullah that she goes and stands up to her father and says, no, Rasulullah has ordered you to do something, you need to follow that. So go back, show Joy a bit of respect. You go now and go talk to Rasulullah and get this thing solved. So we have to make sure also that we are creating this same environment in our house. That when we're raising our kids, look, when we're talking about this idea of obedience, again, this is just talking about this kind of outdated British colonial type of tarbiyah. When you want obedience in the household, it's not obedience to you, the parents. It's obedience to Allah. Their love shouldn't be for the sake of you. It should be for the sake of the Ahlul Bayt. That's how love and obedience in a household should be developed. Even when we have this famous hadith, right, from Imam Ali alayhi salam asking Bibi Zainab alayhi salatu wasalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. And he's asked, why do you have this love for me? Or do you even love me, right? You have these different types of narrations. And she says, yes, I love you, but it's for the sake of Allah, right? This love that I have towards you is because of the love of Allah. Everything that we have is directed because of Allah. There is no, we are humans first and then we are Muslims. No, we don't have anything like that. No, we are Muslims. All that humanity stuff comes secondary. We are only real humans because we are real Muslims. That's the only way a person can become a real human being. Humanity is not defined based on some set of liberal, mutually agreed upon principles. The principles that make somebody a true human being are only found in Islam, nowhere else. Nobody else can make this up, right? It's not coming from the Enlightenment. It's not coming from some scientific experiment or some random other, philosophical thinker. No. It's coming from Allah through the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. This is the only place where you can get a true idea of humanity. Everything needs to be focused there. And this is why this individual, it's interesting. Somebody mentioned to me last night, they said, aren't they taking away the free will of the daughter? That they're forcing the daughter to get married to this guy. Like, she doesn't want to do it. You see, this is where you know that this daughter truly is obedient to Allah. She's not, in this episode, she's not saying, whether she's interested in this guy or not. She doesn't care at all about the individual. She says, look, my obedience is towards Allah. It's towards Rasulullah. My love is directed towards Allah, to Rasulullah. If he gives an order, that's the only thing that matters to me. It's not about chemistry or do we click or do we have the same taste in movies or food or things like that. She doesn't care about any of that. She says, look, if he is a mu'min, because he's been advised by Rasulullah, then he's suitable for me because I'm getting that advice. That's it. Her ego is completely out of the equation. Right? So she's showing the peak of Iman. And because of this whole episode, because she is egoless and she's able to make that decision and that change, she is now able to change her father's mind. So you have a child. Again, think of this household. A child is able now to go to a father, a parent, and tell them that what they're doing is incorrect. Imagine raising your kids to this extent. Again, not an obedient child, but a child who's able to tell you when you're doing something which is not suitable in terms of Islam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Sorry about that. We have a household set up where what is keeping us together is the connection to Allah, to Islam, to the Ahlul Bayt. So that we see that when somebody deviates from that, we should be called out for it. So if I'm doing something incorrect, I should raise my children in such a way, not that they obey me blindly, but that they're able to say, look, what you're doing is not good. What you're doing is incorrect. This is not right. And it's interesting because the other day, I was with my two eldest daughters at Aldi, and there was a certain food item. And look, I know all my fiqh loopholes. So I'm picking it up, and I've never seen this before, so I'm checking the ingredients. And look, I know the rules. So I'm like, oh, I can actually get this because of XYZ reasons. I know the fatwa, I'm allowed to eat this. It's not a big deal. And so my eldest is like, Daddy, what is this stuff? And I started to explain to her. I'm like, yeah, but based on so-and-so ruling, I can get it. It's not a big deal. Like, Daddy, I think you need to put it down. Why would you get it? It may not be allowed, so I think you should put it away. I was like, what is my daughter doing? Like, ruining my life. I just want to have this, food. And she's the one telling me ihtiyat is better. She's the one reminding me that in a gray situation, the advice from the Ahlul Bayt is that, look, ihtiyat is always going to be better. Why? Just for this, sake of this food. It's very interesting that, my 6-year-old is telling me that I should be doing this kind of stuff. Now, whether I'm going to bring her next time when I go shopping, that's a whole different discussion. Maybe not. But, at least as a parent, it makes me proud to say that now, if I get, older, like in a small thing like this, if she's able to call me out for it, then I know that when I hit a red line, definitely she'll be able to call me out. Right? And that's the kind of families we need to raise. If we're able to get them for these small things, whether small little food issues, whatever it happens to be, if they can do this at a young age, then when they get older, this is why the hadith say, first 7 years, they're the master. Next 7 years, you're the master. Those final 7 years, meaning 14 to 21, they should be like your advisor. They should be in the position where they're telling you when you're doing something wrong, and you should be able to listen to them like a friend. So yeah, what you're saying is right. But if you can get them to do that earlier, all right, 6 is pushing it, but if you can get them to do that earlier, then really, this means that your family has been blessed. And the reason I say that is because we have, this is the last hadith I'll mention from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It's reported to have said that إِذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِأَهْلِ بَيْتٍ خَيْرًا, whenever Allah wishes the best for a family, I know you've heard the word Ahlul Bayt, but it means any type of family, not the Ahlul Bayt, but any family. When He wishes for them to grow, when He wants khair for them, then He gives them deep understanding fid deen. He gives all of the family a stronger understanding of deen. وَوَقَّرَ صَغِيرُهُمْ كَبِيرُهُمْ. The youth of that family will always respect the elders, regardless of who they are. I'm going to skip the Arabic because of, we're going over time now. He'll make sure that they are moderate in their spending as well. In their religion, they will be lenient with one another, and they will be able to mirror one another's faults, meaning they'll call each other out. He says this is when Allah desires a strong family. When that family wants khair, and Allah sees that, they will make sure that family has these qualities, where they will all together have that deep understanding and wisdom in their deen. The young will respect the old. They will have a moderate way of living, right? The kids won't be demanding constant, things all the time. They'll be moderate, and they won't want to spend too much. They will live moderate lives as well. They will be able to mirror faults to one another, and they will help stop each other from committing sins. And then Allah said, and then at the end of it, if Allah does not want your family to have that khair, then you won't find these qualities in your family. So we all have to ask ourselves whether or not we have these qualities there. We can all, in this story, take a look and see, maybe I fit into one of these categories. Maybe I'm like Juwaybir, where I have that negativity about the community right now, right? I just think the worst of everybody. Like, this person, they've got some ulterior motive. Or this person, right, they're talking behind my back, right? It's easy for us to be negative. Well, if that's the case, then this is something we can learn from the story, that we may be the cause of the actual negative situation, our negative thinking, which we saw is not the quality of a mu'min. Or maybe we're like Ziyad. Maybe we're good on the surface level, but when push comes to shove, and we're actually challenged for some of our Islamic beliefs, then we hold on to our past culture. Or maybe we're like Dhalfa, the daughter in the story, who happened to deal with, a decent family, but sometimes those family members are not acting the best way. So maybe our job is to start confronting our family of ways that they're speaking or things that they're doing that are not in the best for their Islamic growth. Or, maybe, again, one of the good qualities about Ziyad as well here is that after his daughter calls him out, he's able to think about this and say, yes, you are right. He destroys his ego in that moment and says, you know what? I need to make sure I claim that I'm a Muslim, so I do need to submit to Rasulullah. Although I have this hold onto my previous culture, I need to recognize that there is a commandment, there's an order, an advice from Rasulullah. I should follow that. Not all of us will get these sort of opportunities where we are going to be challenged like this. Through one individual, this one person, Juwaybir, from Rasulullah giving him that advice, his life is completely changed. He goes from being completely poor, having nothing, to having a huge house, furnished, wealth. He gets everything, right? And he gets the most beautiful person in Medina from this. You see that Ziyad as well, right? He's living a decent life, but his iman was at a lower level. Because of this trial and tribulation, his iman was able to grow. Why? Because of his daughter pushing him and doing that. So all of these three individuals work in tandem and are able to increase each other's iman, right? You see, and this was our point from yesterday. These three individuals now, just three individuals, because of their specific actions, have made a social change. And the biggest change here was Juwaybir, who has nothing at all, and now is one of the wealthiest individuals in society. He gets married, he has a big house, it's fully furnished, and he changed the life and the perspective of Ziyad as well. So the point that we were making last night is we don't have to think about these big grand things. It's not about ending hunger or spreading the message of the Ahlul Bayt to all of Seminole County. No. Outreach doesn't have to be this big, huge dilemma. There's always one thing we can focus on that you and I have the power to focus on. Maybe it's changing the life of one individual, whether it's through education or helping them call out, their egotism or their arrogance or their cultural baggage, right? Whatever it happens to be. You and I have to figure out, where are we in the story? Which part are we playing? Are we on the negative side or are we on the positive side? And what is our duty here? Think about it, inshallah, and hopefully we would have learned a lesson from this story. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When we talk about the masa'ib of the Ahlul Bayt, we give these different titles to the imams or to the members of the Ahlul Bayt. We say that Zainab is al Masa'ib, right? Because of everything that she had gone through. She went through Karbala, she witnessed it. She had gone to Kufa, to Sham, and then back to Karbala, and then Medina. So we don't talk about Imam Hussein as being Abul Masa'ib, right? Because we feel as though that Zainab's difficulty was even more. We refer to Imam Hussein as Gharib though, don't we? We say that he was a stranger, he was Gharib, he was alone. But there's a difference, and there's a reason why for Imam Ar-Ridha, we say, look, although Imam Hussein was a Gharib, there's something that we recognize that makes Imam Ar-Ridha Gharib al-Ghuraba. He is lonelier than anybody else. And think about it. Imam Hussein, when he gets up and he is forced to leave Medina, his home, towards Makkah, and then eventually towards Karbala, he's with Abbas, he's with Akbar, he's with Qasim, he's with Zainab, he's with Sakina, he's with Asghar. His whole family's with him. Even in Karbala, he's able to bid farewell to his family. He's able to say his final Khudafis and Salam to Zainab, to Sajjad, to Sakina. But we say, what was the treatment that Imam Ar-Ridha receives? When he is forcibly taken from Medina, who comes with him? Is his son, Imam al-Jawad, is he allowed to come? No, he has to leave his son behind. And they say once that when Imam Ar-Ridha took his son, Imam Jawad, they were going for Hajj. And after they were getting ready to leave, and Imam Jawad was very young at this point, when the servant came and picked up Imam Jawad, said, it's time to go, we're leaving now. Imam Jawad refused to get up. So Imam Ar-Ridha came and said, why don't you want to leave now? It's time to go, we have to get back. He said, I saw the way that you made tawaf. He's like, the way you were making tawaf, it made me feel as though this is the last tawaf you will ever perform. It's as though you were saying Khudafis to the Kaaba. And it made me feel as though that you'll never see this again, and that means you'll never see me again as well. This is the wisdom, and this is the deep insight that the Ahlul Bayt had for one another. How difficult it must have been for all the family members to give their final salams. For years they were never able to see their Imam again, as the Imam was forcibly taken from Medina. Imagine, they say he had 40 siblings, all 40 of them. Every single one of them struggled to try to meet with the Imam In Karbala, you see that Imam Hussein is the one running to his son, running to his brothers, running to everybody, able to give, and as they gave him their final salams. But for Imam Ar-Ridha, the siblings were coming after him. They were trying their best along from Medina to come and see him, to come and meet him in Iran. People always ask, why do we have all these Imamzadas buried all throughout on the way to Iran? It's because they got up, they left, they said, we have to come and meet and see our brother. We have to come. Why is Bibi Masuma there buried on the way? As they were going on the way there, when Ma'mun found out, he would go and attack the caravan in each and every place that they went. They tried to split up wherever they were going, and they were killed where they were. So wherever they were killed, they were buried there. This is why the family of the 7th Imam and the 8th Imam, they are buried all over the Muslim world. This is a proof to us that wherever the Imam is, true Shias will always chase after the Imam. And now in his final moments, we say that the Imam at least was able to say Khudafis to his family members. But poor Imam Al-Ridha, Gharib al-Ghuraba, in his final moments, when he's been given the poison by Ma'mun, they say the poison was so strong in his body that it knocked him back. And he fell down to the floor. And they say that thought comes to our mind, if only one of your companions or family members were there, they could have caught you, they could have taken care of you. But they say that he was completely alone in those moments. He died by himself with no one else around him. So yes, this makes your ghurba so much, but we say there's one thing that we shouldn't forget, that in your final moments, yes, it was only Ma'mun who was there witnessing your poison, but we ask you, Imam Al-Ridha, was there anybody sitting on your chest in your final moments? Were you there begging for water in your final moments? Was Bibi Fatima there in your final moments saying, please do not put this dagger on the throat of my son in your final moments? ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا 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 رو کے معصوم آئے خم رو کے معصوم آئے خم خم سے دیتی ہے صدا اے میرے بھائی رضا اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا تیرا دیدار نہیں بائی قسمت میں میری دے ہواؤں کو ذرا حکم ہے میرے علی سن لو آواز تیری سن لو آواز تیری دل بہل جائے میرا اے میرے بھائی رضا اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا دیکھنے آئی ہوں میں گم سے صورت تیری اے غریب الغربا دیکھ غربت میری کوئی بتلاتا نہیں کوئی بتلاتا نہیں مجھ کو مشہد کا پتہ اے میرے بھائی رضا اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا مجھ پہ جو بیٹھ گئے وہ علم کچھ بھی نہیں سامنے زینب کے میرے غم کچھ بھی نہیں میں نہ بازار گئی میں نہ بازار گئی نہ چھنی میری ردا اے میرے بھائی رضا اے غریب الغربا جب سے پہنچی ہوں میں کم دل ہے قابو میں کہاں غم زدہ اے نظر شہر کے پیر و جوان دیکھ کر کھالے علم دیکھ کر کھالے علم دل دہلتا ہے میرا اے میرے بھائی رضا اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا ہوں یتیمہ لیکن وہ یتیمہ تو نہیں قیدی بابا کی قسم میں سکینہ تو نہیں جس کے گوہر بیچنے جس کے گوہر بیچنے ہے جس کا دامن بھی جلا ہے میرے بھائی رضا اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا کس جگہ کھار چوبے کس جگہ تھک کے گری پوچھو چھالوں سے ذرا کیسے میلوں میں چلی زخم پیروں کے تمہیں زخم پیروں کے تمہیں غم سنائیں گے میرا اے میرے بھائی رضا اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی رضا ساتھ جائے گا میرے یہ غم تنہائی تم بھی اکبر کی طرح نہیں لوٹے بھائی روز سغرا کی طرح روز سغرا کی طرح میں جلاتی ہوں دیا اے میرے بھائی رضا اے غریب الغربا اے میرے بھائی یا حسین 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 سورۃ فاتحہ
اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه ساتي وفي كل ساعة إيام وقائدا وناصرا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيد نساء العالمين السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان سيدي الأمان 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 السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته